It is, however, really profoundly focused on insight into I'm not alone and this all has meaning.
How common would you say are after death or near death experiences for people?
They are probably more common than people might realize.
Approximating 25% of people, 50% of people?
It's all over the place. It can be between about 25% of the population up to 60%. So you have to remember, not everyone is going to endorse this. They might experience it, but not share with other people. And when we've done research explicitly asking people if they've had any kind of communication like this, they will say yes and share their story and then disclose that they've never told anybody. And you can imagine why. They think that someone's going to think they're crazy or that they're making it up.
That would be, the question that would jump out at me. And I'll use an example from my personal life. My mother passed. I go on this hike to kind of clear my head. Long hike. I get up to the central point of the hike, cloudy all the time. I get up to the top and the sun comes out. And I guess you could read that, depending on how you believe, two ways, right? Like, this is a sign. My mother is wherever. Or like, it's just a complete coincidence. Like, how do you kind of separate between those two?
That's a really good question, and it can be tough. And a lot of it boils down to the interpretations and beliefs of the individual. As a clinical psychologist, which is what I am in my background, I'm way more interested in how it impacts people. Does that make you feel better? Does it help you cope with your grief? Does it make you feel like you're not alone?
That makes sense, right? Because I'm not a religious person. I'm not a spiritual person, but it does make me happy in a way, right? And so I guess kind of, but is there a, I'll just use the phrase dark side to that kind of thing, right? Like, okay, it makes somebody happy. So what? Leave them alone. But can this go negative where people obsess or it weighs down on them rather than lifting them up?
Well, I mean, I think you can ask that of any kind of belief system. You think about any structured religion. Can it go sideways? Oh, yeah. We've seen that.
We've seen that. Yeah.
It can be used against people. It can be manipulated. So yes, that's definitely a possibility. And that's, that would be an interesting line of research to look at. We do know that in the after-death communication research, when we've explored that, there are people who feel like they've been contacted and had experiences, and they were sort of, not real positive for them. So it might have been sort of alarming or negative in some way with, their affect is impacted in a negative way. However, what we do find in the literature, in the research, is that for the majority of people, and I'm talking, about 75% or higher, maybe 85% even, it is generally seen as a positive thing. So they feel that it is demonstrating to them that there is something beyond, that someone is still connected to them, sort of that continuation of the connection. And for many of them, they decrease their fear of death and dying.
So your research is focused more on the idea that people have this, not necessarily trying to prove that these things are really exist or not.
Yes, I work with people, and a lot of my work is with people who have very serious illness. I work with oncology patients, people who are really facing their own death. And many of them have significant fear of death and dying. This is very problematic. I've seen many very bad deaths, which are just heartbreaking. It's hard enough to work with someone who is actively dying, and then to work with someone who's dying and denying it or fighting it because of fear. So I look to this work as a way to help improve the quality of life for people.
Is there like people who report after death experiences, near death experiences, after death communications? Do they fit into a kind of a category, right? Like, is it mostly men, mostly women, mostly religious people, mostly spiritual people? Like, do they ultimately kind of trend in a certain direction?
Well, here's what's interesting. When you look at after people who report after death communications, it is global. And we see it most commonly, obviously, in people who have someone who passed away fairly recently. So it's most often seen in people who've had someone they love pass away within the year. It is more common in women. There again, we don't really know if that's a true statistic or if it's just that women tend to endorse these things more than men. In general, they sort of self-report things like this more, psychological components, emotions, that sort of thing. So the answer is really it happens universally and across time. I mean, you can find reports of these in, as far back as the Bible and earlier Greek writings and things like that. So it seems to be something that humans have experienced since the beginning of humanity.
You specialize in after-death communication. So an after-death communication is?
So typically we think about the various categories and obviously you can be contacted in different ways. Visually, what we might think of as an apparition, or like we were talking about, the sun coming out, or a cardinal, something that signifies the loved one who's passed away. It can be a voice, hearing words. And that includes, some people get phone calls that are like sort of staticky or happen and they attribute it. Again, this is all what they attribute it to. This is my mother calling. Some feel a presence. So they just feel the sense that that person's in the room with them. They smell aromas. You might smell their perfume. Touch. You can also feel the hand on the face or a hand on your shoulder. So all of these ways can be ways that we experience in after-death communication.
I think the thing that jumps out too, right, for skeptical people, they could just be like, guys, just a missed phone call, right? Like, is that difficult from a research perspective to kind of be like, well, you know what? Maybe you, like, I got a phone call from my mother after I've been drinking all night. Like, well, maybe it's because you were drinking all night, right? Like, is it difficult to kind of, how do you take into account those things where that maybe jump out like, well, maybe this was happening?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you bring this up because we don't typically have people knocking down our doors to tell us about these experiences. So you do have to consider the source, obviously. And many people are sort of hesitant and a little reluctant and take a little, bit of feeling safe and being invited to share these things. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. There's a bit of a hurdle to get over for these folks. And of course, you're right. There can be people who tell us these things and we may think it's a different kind of attribution, like that seems more like a missed phone call to me. Again, I'm going to go back to what does this individual believe and why might it be important and how could it be helpful?
When you look at I believe if I looked at, there was like 12 main categories of after-death communications. Is there one or two that are much more prevalent than other ones?
I think it's very common for people to sense a presence of someone. And I think part of that may be because it's sort of general enough that, it seems more accessible maybe.
It's both specific enough and vague enough that kind of can categorize as anything.
And we all know what that feels like, which is also interesting.
Is there any research though that would suggest that, like this is just a brain coping mechanism?
Yeah, and there are people who argue that I don't know. Again, that's not my specific area of expertise, and I'm not very aware of any research that has said yes, this is where where that happens in the brain, and that's what's going on. It's certainly a hypothesis. What's more common is a hypothesis that these are just sort of wishes. And as you sort of alluded to, like I want to believe this, so then I imbue it with this attribution. I say that yes, this is what it is.
That's kind of my personal opinion about, I would say, I'll use the word stuff like this, right? Is that it doesn't matter if it's real or not. It's real to you. And
Mm-hmm.
it does, I mean, obviously it's an incredibly powerful experience. Does it change people's lives?
They do impact you. They change your outlook. They often people endorse that they are more spiritual with all that that means to them. Maybe they feel more connected to people. They feel like there is something bigger than themselves. They feel like there's a purpose. Many people experience a very intense positive affect, some knowledge that everything is okay, that it's all the way it should be, sort of this profound equanimity that is obviously very, very helpful in living your life when you feel connected, supported, that you're supposed to be here, that your life is moving the way it should. Those all help people feel much more safe, more connected, more productive, and also, interestingly, simultaneously reduce the fear of death. So I can be engaged in my life fully and really embrace it, and also accept that there is this other phase of it called death, and it doesn't have to be terrifying.
Are you ready for some harder / listener submitted questions?
Sure.
I'm one of those people, like, I don't transition well. I just do it.
Sounds good.
Let's get right into one of the hard ones. What do you think we fear more? Death or not knowing what happens next, or if something happens next?
Interestingly, for that question, it's a really good question. I'm going to add a third choice in there. What the research shows people fear most is the pain of dying, the process of dying. Think about it, a prolonged, agonizing death. When we've done research, this is the thing that most people fear the most. And I think there is a risk for that. You do see people in, again, certain very extreme religions where this life is all about just getting to the next. And those are often in sort of these religions where we are sort of waiting for the next big thing. So I think that's more of a risk than thinking about this as sort of a cheapened version. Because again, it's interesting that if you think about it, many people that have these experiences actually value this life more. So the research would seem to contradict that. And part of it is that we suspect is that they understand some sort of shift happens in their consciousness, that they understand they're not alone. They are connected, that they're already that way,
Do you personally believe in an afterlife?
I have had experiences that have allowed me to perceive that there is more out there than we currently think about in our modern day science. I'll say that, modern day science is pretty materialistic, where, you're in your body, your brain is what produces all this stuff. And then when your brain dies and your body dies, you're gone. I don't know if I buy that. I will say that. What is the alternative? I'm still exploring. I think there are other possibilities, and that to some extent we can research them. I'm very interested in how we can research what these beliefs mean to people and how they impact the quality of their life, how they treat other people, how they treat the earth, that sort of thing. So for me, I guess it's less important to find the ultimate answer and maybe more important to think about, well, what are the implications here and now for our world and for individuals?
Do you think, okay, what do you think would impact the world more if we found out absolutely with like 100% proof that yes, there is, or 100% proof that no, there isn't?
I think, first of all, not everyone's going to believe everything, but if we go hypothetically, personally, I think it would be far more tragic to put out there that idea that this is all it is, that we're just material, and when we die, that's it. We had no sort of consequence. We're not connected to anything larger. There was really no meaning in our life. I think that would be really hard.
It does seem like the kind of thing that I could see somebody like the most skeptical person in the world at the same time being like, this is absolute blah, blah, blah. And then pulling you aside and being like, hey, this thing happened to me the other day.
That does happen. So people have disclosed their own experiences and how profoundly it impacted them. They still usually report that they can't come public with it because of the fear of, a stigma attached to it.
The last question that we got, what after-death communication or near-death experience stands out to you the most? Besides your own, obviously.
There are so many. One really amazing one to me was interesting because it was the first one I heard where it was a sort of a more harsh version. We often think of loving and supportive and, very touching type of encounters. And this was a gentleman who was struggling with alcohol addiction. And we'd been working a long time and he was not making much progress. And I had taught him meditation. And, early on when I was doing the meditation work, a lot of these experiences came from people learning to meditate and practicing their meditation. And then they would report some of these unusual experiences. He had what he considered, he called it some sort of communication from someone that he felt connected to, but he didn't really know who they were, but he felt a sense that they were connected. And it was this voice, this very harsh female voice who was telling him to get his shit together and stop being, a baby and just get on board. And he needed to quit drinking or he was going to die. So it was clearly not him. It was not his own thoughts. He said, no, I've had those thoughts. I know that stuff. This was someone else coming to me and I heard them plain as day. This is what they told me. Now, he was not psychotic. He did not have a thought disorder. He was not actively drinking excessively where he would have had some sort of delusion. He changed overnight because he said that communication knew him, got him, and that it resonated with him. And I've not heard many stories like that where someone comes back and scolds you so harshly and says pretty harsh things to you, and you attribute it to someone that is invested in you, but you don't know them. So that was a little odd and bizarre. What I was most impressed with was the impact. I mean, it worked. And I can tell you, I swear, we had worked for so long to help him reduce his intake and he just quit. And we see sort of similar things with psychedelic drugs, not to get too off topic, but this idea of expanding this consciousness, having some sort of experience where it's almost like everything shifts and it can do so really quickly. Because it's like some light bulb going off, like, now I get it. And what that is for each person is a little bit different. It is, however, really profoundly focused on connection, on something larger than themselves, some insight into I'm not alone, and this all has meaning.